This is a different, I'm arguing, a different trajectory for culture. That people that come after this time will be different subjectivities, if we still want to use that word. It will be debatable. It will be debatable. Nietzsche still lived and wrote in a time when the problem of theology was the believer or the non-believer. How to respond to the non-believer. The problems in theology and philosophy today, when they're posed at their highest levels, are not the problems of believers and non-believers, but of humans and the non-human. You see, until you have a certain subjective framework, the issue of belief doesn't even arise. The issue arises about, are the people to whom we address ourselves still human? And then it will be interesting again to discuss gods, their powers, magic, mystery, murder in the rain, and so on, once we've determined the deeper question about whether a society that first replaces sort of physical labor and then later begins to replace mental labor as it progresses does not efface the human entirely. I've argued that it already has begun to move it away into a representation or into an image. Well, this possibility is the possibility of what I would like to call, in the spirit of Nietzsche, nihilism technologically realized. That's scarier than Nietzsche's nihilism as a form of belief which would bring an end to this atmosphere within which the world was still mendacious and magical. This would be the technological realization of nihilism. Let me try to make that clear to you by explaining something that I think we all will know as a familiar example. There are great apocalypse stories in the Bible has a pretty good apocalypse story, right? I think it's boom, Revelation. Certain preachers really like to do that one, and it's exciting, and there are riders and thunder. The fact that apocalypse was technologically achievable and that we could set up all the technical necessities for it is now very old news, isn't it? Am I wrong about that? Or isn't the fact that we have technologically achieved the ability to construct a real apocalypse? I'm not now talking about a biblical myth, but an apocalypse on a high order. I mean, we now that the Soviet Union's breaking up and that particular myth is fading into other myths and other stories and other narratives, this possibility may not seem as real, but it's important to see that people born into a culture in which apocalypse is now a technological possibility that will be carried out by faceless people in little silos and guys carrying little briefcases, punching little buttons, is an incredible distance from these intricately constructed myths in the Old Testament, in the New Testament. And it's a different kind of apocalypse because this one is a technological achievement. Similarly, I'm arguing that Nietzsche's nihilism was still a matter of the drying up of a certain kind of subjectivity and belief formation, and Nietzsche's hope was the creation of new ones, subjectivities, new radical autonomous subjectivities. And again, because he doesn't belong to the dogmatic tradition in philosophy, not necessarily or not at all perhaps subjectivities like his own. But a possibility that I think Nietzsche himself did not face was that nihilism, the belief in nothing, the will to nothingness, the end of subjectivity, of human powers, would itself become technologically realizable. So I hope that my example of the development of weapons of so-called mass destruction, which from our postmodern perspective I've argued already seems giddy and utopian. I mean, now we look back on that and we go see those old atomic war movies, and I've watched the audiences and they just love the blow-up scenes. No kidding. They go, wow, boom, look at that, the trees are flat and all. And already to us, that's a nostalgic moment. It was perhaps our last chance to realize a decent end to our species, one that would have been worthy of it. Now we may just trod endlessly, solving one little technical adjustment after another to the finely tuned echo machines that we used to call our bodies. Someone asked me earlier, perhaps it was on a break or something, someone asked me about, what about the ecology movement? We live in an environment where its most famous spokesman is the McDonald's Corporation. I mean, the possibilities for radical subjectivities arising under these conditions become exceedingly bizarre. Now, you go, oh, well, this is too much. Okay, this is too postmodern. I'm lost now. I can't. Well, believe me, that again, the development in the late 20th century and the trajectory of it shouldn't be underestimated. It really shouldn't. And I don't want it to be necessarily, in fact, it cannot, because of other necessary conditions, be a moment of despair, since that's long over with. The example I gave of that was, we all know that existentialism, what we used to think Nietzsche was, right, an existentialist. Kierkegaard was an existentialist. Very shallow way to understand them, and that's been over a long time. Now, if you want an existentialist, as I said earlier, you'll see Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventure, playing Twister with death. And that moment's over a long time ago. I even had a professor who said the only reason it ever was so big is that a lot of professors found it to be a very convenient way to meet people and so on. Say, I'm just worried about dying, so have I, and then you strike up a conversation. Like one of Woody Allen's movies, the joke was, can we go out Saturday night? And no, I'm committing suicide on Friday. Woody Allen says, well, what about Thursday then? Oh. Well, clearly the technologies that are coming, and I'll mention a few of them, virtual reality suits. You go, well, oh, wow, nice flipped, virtual reality suits. No, they were actually developed for a quite sensible reason. They were developed for long space flights back in the days when NASA thought they were going to go on long space flights. Now we understand that there's no need to, because we can go to Epcot Center and experience one, so we don't need it for the consuming public. That's because we can already experience a long space flight at Epcot Center, just like we don't need to go to Switzerland anymore. We can go to Busch Gardens, where the Swiss food is even more Swiss. We can buy a Swiss clock, and we can avoid all the problems connected with travel. And experience Switzerland, The thing is, I'm not even joking, because when you go to Switzerland, there'll be the same stuff, and McDonald's will be there too. And the television will be on the same channels, and the Holiday Inn will be open, and the room will look just like the one does here, and so on. This postmodern space is not a dream of theorists. It is becoming our culture and way of life. I'm just describing it. I don't even know how to denounce it. This is not a criticism. Some parts of it make me feel giddy and kind of excited, because virtual reality suits, if we let our imaginations go for a moment, could have endless, fascinating possibilities. Right? Right. Sure. I mean, you can... lots of things that human powers couldn't accomplish, right? In the 19th century, lots of things that couldn't be accomplished by human power were accomplished by steam power and so on. Well, maybe our imaginations are limited in that the machines we build now will be able to spur them on to accomplish incredible things in that way. But anyway, the virtual reality suits, I'll talk about in just a minute, and then we'll get us now, were created so that on a long space flight, our space traveler wouldn't become disoriented in space, but would be able to put on this suit and thus feel earthbound for a while to reorient himself or herself on their space flight. Well, now the virtual reality suit they're working on marketable versions, and that means ones that are cost effective, which means that we're still living in relations of capital, because that means somebody wants to make a dollar, which is okay. So do I. So do you. There's no reason in recognizing a necessity, no matter how cruel the necessity is. You've got to recognize them sometimes. In any case, the virtual reality suits will be marketed, and they offer this interesting technological possibility. You've always wanted to go out with Mel Gibson or